Why? Stop. Why is this thing not hot? I swear to God, if anyone says welcome to womanhood, I'm gonna lose my shit.
If no one else is gonna come out and say it, I will. I'm happy to. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, lizard people of all ages and variants thereupon, my name is Weebo Jones, and the Empress has no f***ing uterus.
Okay, the big question, do I as a trans woman get my period?
Do I get a period as a trans girl?
Do you get your period as a trans girl?
Desi, do you get periods?
Okay, let's break this one down because I've actually been asked this a lot.
This was not the video I intended to produce first thing in the new year. But I happened to see the initial video on the Twitterverse last week, and although I may be late to the party, I simply could not keep my cake hole shut. I couldn't just do a quick quote tweet to respond. I needed to really think about what it is that exactly it was that I felt and needed to say about this topic. So this video, and the sentiment around it, I have to admit, has got me feeling several certain kinds of ways. For some reason, there is this idea floating around in the ether of the internet that trans women get periods. We see it with a whole bunch of trans TikTokers being asked this question time and time and time again ad nauseum on their TikToks in the comments sections by curious viewers. And the answers are variable. Some people are a bit more genuine in their answers, while others are, for lack of a better term, being disingenuous. And this has greatly disgruntled me for the reasons that I will be laying out here in this video. But first, there is some myth-busting that has to be done. Please note, I am not a gynecologist, nor am I an endocrinologist. The only credentials that I have in this fight happen to be situated squarely in my nether regions. So I did some digging into this idea, this notion of the trans period, and it seems like there is at least some truth to the idea that trans women go through a sort of cyclical symptomology similar to that of the feminine reproductive cycle. The key phrase here being similar to.
Okay, let's break this one down because I've actually been asked this a lot. And no, not in the way that you're thinking. Trans women do not have a menstrual cycle. That's the same as a cisgender woman's. So like we will never, I don't have a uterus. Like I'm not going to start like bleeding once a month because I don't produce eggs. Like that whole process doesn't happen. But we do have a hormonal kind of cycle that's similar to a menstrual cycle, but I take my shot once a week. So I have estrogen cycles going on weekly. And if I go off of my estrogen, I can definitely tell the difference. I get much more moody and irritable. I have hot flashes. So for top surgery, I actually had to go off of hormones for multiple weeks. And I was definitely more moody and I woke up, in hot flashes. And so it was definitely kind of difficult, but yeah, our period is more of like a hormonal cycle that's, just natural in how we get our hormones, but it's very different.
Which tracks, trans women are placed on a schedule of hormone treatments in order to accomplish a whole host of goals. And at their core, hormones are one of the key building blocks of humankind that make us who we are and play a role in our differences between each other. At any given point in your life, there is a cocktail of hormones being released by the various glands in your body, responsible for everything from regulating your sleep to your metabolism, triggering growth and development, and so much more I can't even begin. We owe hormones a lot. And so it would make sense that a trans woman engaging in gender-affirming hormone replacement therapy to present more feminine, administering it to herself at regular intervals, would present with symptomology akin to at least part of the average 28-day cycle that a female typically goes through. However, some people would have you believe that checking some of the symptom boxes of the thing equates to having the thing itself, as is evidenced by the beautiful, although misguided and misinformed trans women you're seeing on the screen presently. I'll speed through this next part since it gets very descriptive and clinical, and I know might make a few of the audience members a little bit uncomfortable. I will say that you will have the luxury of being able to skip this section altogether using the timestamps for this video, which are located down below. Now, while the menstrual cycle does require a change in the production of hormones, those hormones play but a part in the process as a whole. By necessity, a period involves a physical change in the uterus as well. You see, friends! What commonly is referred to as a period is the shedding of the uterine lining, or endometrium, the intended purpose of which is for the implantation of the egg and subsequent maintenance of pregnancy should implantation occur. Barring that, menstruation occurs, which is the process we're talking about today, and is triggered by falling levels of the hormone progesterone in the absence of pregnancy, and a subsequent release of inflammatory mediators as the endometrium breaks down. These inflammatory mediators being released cause the uterus to contract. The contractions of the uterus further constricts the blood supply to the endometrium, which continues to break down and die. The uterine contractions then continue to squeeze out the dead endometrial tissue past the cervix and through the vagina. Mechanically speaking, the cramps associated with this whole process are an acute awareness of the contractions of the muscles of the uterus caused by the release of those inflammatory mediators in the uterus, which also can have a hand in other symptoms such as nausea, vomiting, bloating, headaches, migraines, etc. But let me just blow your minds just a little bit. Everyone associates cramps with periods. Everyone. The kicker with a menstrual cycle is that 15.9% of cis women reported they didn't even experience period cramps while on their period. And about 56.9% of the same respondents reported that they didn't experience menstrual pain for every period. The reason why? Well, that's anyone's guess. I, and probably every woman who's gone through menses knows this, period symptoms and how bad they are have been a crapshoot of random variants out of a magician's hat since the onset of the very first period ever. No two periods are alike for the individual, and no two female periods are alike between them, barring one thing. A period, which, as we stated, is the colloquial terminology everyone uses to refer to the very clinical thing we know as the menstrual cycle. By necessity, it needs to present with bleeding. Otherwise, it is something entirely different. Say it with me. A period is not classified by its symptoms, rather by its mechanical function. The bleeding is not a symptom of a period. It is the period. And I know at least some members of the trans community are aware of the very important role bleeding plays into the reality of the period, or I never would have been exposed to such a concept as the ketchup popsicle in this current day. And before you ask the question out loud, the ketchup popsicles refer to exactly what you think they refer to. Now, before you come at me with, in fact, there are females who have all the period symptoms who don't bleed. G'der. As we stated before, period symptoms are not the period. The period is the period. The bleeding is the period, okay? Yes, barring pregnancy or menopause, that absence of the bleeding actually could be a symptom of an underlying medical issue. For example, in the case of amenorrhea, which is a literal absence of menstrual bleeding. Now, this particular medical issue, amenorrhea, comes in two varieties depending on your age, the cause of which are usually structural problems with sex organs or issues with the pituitary or thyroid glands, or take your pick of any one of these other causes from the sizable list on the screen presently. Amenorrhea can be an indicator of something as innocent as too much exercise or something as serious as ovarian cancer. The simple fact of the matter, and this is where we get into the real meat of the issue here, is that as trans rights activists work to co-opt reproductive terminology to fit their inclusion narrative, they are doing females and their overall health a disservice by spreading this idea that it is completely normal to have menstrual symptoms without bleeding. But Weebo, that seems like it would be a no-brainer for women. You would think. And yet, several things seem to be no-brainers that are in fact not no-brainers for women. For instance, Feller et al. 2022 found that of the more than 1,700 female respondents in the US aged 18 to 29, 38% did not know what age begets fertility decline in women, 41% didn't know the age of fertility range, and 55% didn't know the ovaries do not continuously produce new eggs. And you know what? I don't even need statistics to substantiate that people, yes, even in the developed world, are woefully ignorant about reproductive health when there are so many of these videos of trans women responding to TikTok comments asking if they get their period. There are so many. In 2015, the American College of Obstetrician and Gynecologists put forth a document entitled Menstruation in Girls and Adolescents, using the menstrual cycle as a vital sign, endorsing the following key conclusions and recommendations to our topic today. The identification of abnormal menstrual patterns in adolescents may improve early identification of potential health concerns for adulthood, and it is important for clinicians to have an understanding of the menstrual patterns of adolescent girls, the ability to differentiate between normal and abnormal menstruation, and the skill to know how to evaluate the adolescent girl patient. They can't divine that information from patients. The patient in question has to come to their doctor with concerns in the first place, already somewhat aware of the abnormalcy of their menstrual cycles. Which won't happen if the patient is confused enough to ask a trans woman if she gets a period. We all know how completely stupid the general public are when it comes to sex education. It's not a stretch to guess that women are, too, also woefully ignorant about their own cycles, even though they get them, even if they get them. And given enough brainwashing by TikTok that a period is the collection of other symptoms rather than the presence of the very crucial bleeding aspect, I wouldn't put it past them to disregard the absence of blood as a no biggie. Women's reproductive health is already such an overly complicated and stressful thing to contend with. They do not need anything else muddying the waters. Like, for instance, stupid word games.
Do trans girls get periods? The answer to that is yes. No, we do not have a menstruation cycle where we shed our uteral lining because obviously no uterus. Keep up with me. Stick with me.
One of the most important criteria then. No biggie. Carry on, queen.
But our hormonal balances do have periods of time where they spike and decrease, creating symptoms very similar to a menstruation period.
Oh, I see. So period is not in fact the colloquial term synonymously used to refer to menstruation. The word period is actually a clever play on words. How could I be so ignorant? Let's play a game. Tell me you don't understand the cyclical nature of female biology without telling me you don't understand the cyclical nature of female biology. She'll start.
Such as mood swings, bloating, hypersensitivity, our boobs being sore, certain food cravings, things of this sort of nature.
Perfect. She is very good at this game because, in fact, all the symptoms that she just laid out as having experienced as a trans woman on HRT, the mood swings, the bloating, the hypersensitivity, sore boobs, food cravings, all are indicative of a little thing called PMS. Premenstrual syndrome. PMS are those emotional and physical symptoms occurring with regularity in the weeks leading up to the start of each period, and which usually resolve once bleeding begins. They are not the period.
So no, we do not have a menstruation period, but we do have a period of time where our hormonal balances and the estrogen in our body does have spikes and decreases, causing symptoms serious to a menstruation period.
And as I just explained, no, you don't. You suffer symptoms similar to PMS, which, if we're going to be consistent with your wordplay, is an entirely different period of the female reproductive cycle. By necessity, in order to be in the menstruation period of the cycle, one must be bleeding. But many of the symptoms you've just described as experiencing are not the same ones endured during the menstruation period.
So do trans women have a period? Yes. A different one, but a period nevertheless.
This is just about the worst freaking argument in favor of this toxic idea, because not only is it logically, patently dumb, she's just wrong and flailing around with this false information without an iota of care in the world for how irresponsible it is to be putting it out there to an impressionable audience, which, let's be frank, TikTok is full of them. But you know what else sucks? The difference between what fundamentally is a period and what is just dysregulation caused by a cyclical hormonal fluctuation is so important, not just from a medical awareness perspective, because while they often go hand in hand with each other, there is a certain shame and stigma that is explicitly reserved for the bleeding that comes with the shedding of the endometrium. For many millennia, and still to this day, to varying degrees in parts of the world, menstruation is regarded as something gross and impure and disgusting and unclean. The meme of the boyfriend who can't go to the store to buy his girlfriend tampons simply because it's just too embarrassing is evidence enough, methinks. I'm not one to moan incessantly about the annals of feminine woes throughout history, but on this topic I feel uniquely emboldened by the, for lack of a better term, stolen valor feeling of it all. Let's bust out some stats, because I know you love to see them. In early 2018, a poll of 1,500 women and 500 men from across the US, orchestrated by Thinks, found that 58% of women felt a sense of embarrassment for being on their period. 42% of women have experienced period shaming, with 1 in 5 saying this was from comments made by a male friend. 12% of women have been shamed by a family member. 10% of women shamed by a classmate. 73% of women have hid a pad or a tampon from view on their way to the bathroom. 29% of women have canceled plans that may have exposed the fact that they were on their period. And 63% of women have canceled plans due to PMS or period pain. Of those 63%, 40% of them admitted to making up a false explanation. 44% of women felt awkward buying tampons or pads at the store, with 15% feeling so uneasy that they had to resort to buying them online. All because of a normal bodily function. We can't just suck the blood back in, you know. Hold it all day and then release it when we relieve ourselves. It is a continual flow that happens regardless of if we want it to or not. And it comes with so much shame and stigma attached to it. Now, I am not saying that women should free bleed everywhere to destigmatize the bleeding, okay? That's not what I'm telling you. What I am saying is that a trans woman will never suffer the horror of being woefully unprepared for the random day when, as an adolescent female, you notice you've begun to spontaneously bleed down there and freak the fuck out. Will never understand the horror of waking up in the morning and finding you have bled through your pad and onto your bedsheets, or, heavens forbid, the embarrassment of doing it on someone else's bed sheets. You'll never have the nerve-wracking experience of sneezing, gushing uncontrollably, and then subtly sneaking off to the bathroom in the most conspicuous way possible to check and make sure you haven't bled through your pants. We'll never understand the struggle of soaking your unmentionables in a mixture of hydrogen peroxide overnight to salvage those garments you reserve for specifically that time of the month. We'll never know the shame of discreetly sneaking your period kit off to the bathroom with you so you can change your sanitary product about 3 or 4 times a day. You'll never have to worry about toxic shock syndrome with super absorbent tampons, or worry about going anemic from overbleeding. Just like a cis woman will never have to have crippling gender dysmorphia, will not have to undergo several hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of facial feminization surgery, won't ever have to undergo sex reassignment surgery, or dilate their middle hole every day for the rest of their life, or continue to take estrogen to offset the body's natural tendencies, and a whole bunch of other things that I could never even begin to imagine that trans women have to go through.
But wait! There's more!
And if you thought the stigma was cringe, wait until I tell you about period poverty. Not only is there a stigma surrounding the concept of menstruation in women, simultaneous to that, at any point in time, 500 million women and girls all over the world don't even have necessary access to sanitation and hygiene products to be able to manage their cycles, free from embarrassment. 2/3 of the 16.9 million low-income women in the US alone could not afford menstrual products in the past year, with half of this needing to choose between menstrual products and food. And you know what women who lack access to menstrual products improvise sanitary products with? Anything from old blankets to chicken feathers, old rags and newspapers, mud, leaves, and this one I was surprised by, but I don't know why, even cow dung. I want you to just for a moment imagine the horror of being an 8-year-old girl who's just started to menstruate for the first time and realizing she has to stop the leaking using cow dung in the shape of a sanitary napkin. Does that make you uncomfortable? Because it should. Now, I shouldn't have to tell you that the lack of suitable hygiene products can lead to great health concerns with females, such as infections to the urinary tract or reproductive system. So while trans women are out and proud on TikTok milking the social capital of showcasing all the icky symptoms of being on your period while completely writing off the one crucial aspect that makes it a period, they are spitting in the faces of all those not nearly as privileged women and girls across the planet who do get the bleed, along with all of the shame and the discomfort and the stigma of messing herself 4 to 8 days of the month, every month, with very little respite, except maybe some leaves or cow dung in the shape of a pad. You want to talk about cisgendered privilege? There it is, my friends. But that doesn't really matter, does it? I could spout off the science, the definitions, the lived experiences of menses all the livelong day, and it wouldn't matter one iota in the grand war of moral purity being waged right now. Because any sort of deviation from the narrative is in fact transphobic, don't you know?
Now see, this is interesting. This is new, because usually people that are transphobic will say, oh, I'm not transphobic, and then say something transphobic. But she says I'm transphobic and then reaffirm the idea that she's not transphobic. That's an interesting new style, okay. Like, you literally commented on this post saying trans women don't get a period. That's not the point, okay? That is not the point. Trans women do experience a period. But that's not the point. The point is, cis women are so transphobic like you just displayed. And the way you're typing in caps and all these exclamations just shows. Like, it shows your transphobia is shown. Like, do you not see it? This comment just feels like, oh, I'm okay with the trans people, but as long as they know their place, as long as they know that we're the real thing, we're the blueprint, that's what your comment is giving, and that is transphobic. Hello?
Any lack of conformity with the notion that trans women are women, with all the tampons and whistles that label comes with, is blatant bigotry of the highest order, and affront to the trans community. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And it is just that kind of hegemony that has created the perfect storm for a counter-narrative that is detrimental to both women and trans women alike. Whatever the phrase women might mean these days, on a surface level, we might both be women, but our experiences run so much deeper than just some label and the social boxes we fit into. And that's okay. A period's not something that we've socially constructed and must gatekeep to maintain the gender binary at all costs. It is a very tangible, observable, unique reality. The end result of shedding the uterine lining that, barring a hysterectomy, menopause, or pregnancy, or some other health issue, every cis woman and many trans men endure.